Shabbat Shalom and welcome to another edition of the Top 3 at 5. I am Hebron ben Bilal. I'm the elder teacher of the Remnant House of Israel. And we are coming back at you today with another installment of the 613 Commandments, which we do on this platform twice a week, once on the Shabbat and once on Wednesday. What we do is we give out 3 of the commandments in no particular order. And break them down and show why they are applicable, or show how they are applicable to today's time. If you have not already, please go to the channel, the Remnant of the House of Israel, subscribe and hit the bells for notification. We do this twice a week, and we also just upload Sabbath day lessons for those who are trying to just learn the basics. This is basically what we do here on this channel. We keep it basic. We don't get too deep in a lot of theology. We don't try to delve too deep. We want to keep it basic here for those who are coming into a state of enlightenment, who would like to learn the 613 commandments, how to apply them to their lives. We also break down the holy days. We just deal with a whole gamut of different basic tenets in regard to the Hebrew culture. But without further ado, let's jump into this top three of 3. So if you've been keeping track, this will be 6 through 9. Now remember, once again, these commandments that I give do not come in any particular order, but we do take time in breaking down. And excuse my lighting today. I was lazy. I just didn't want to go set up all the lighting and do all that stuff today, but we will get back to that. Now let's jump into these top 3 at 3 this morning, which you will also be able to find in the New Testament. So this morning we're going to start at "You shall not seek revenge against your brother." You shall not seek revenge against your brother. And we're going to be in Leviticus 19 and 18. Leviticus 19 and 18. Now remember, this one is going to be a bit lengthy. This is actually going to be a Sabbath day lesson that I'm going to give to you guys because of the commandments that we're going to be doing here today. And I want to go into detail because it's going to specify a lot of your brother. And I want you to understand that when the commandments are given because of the structure and because of how Israel was at that time, that it just meant, it didn't mean universally like everybody got this same type of treatment. And we're going to get into that. It literally spoke about your neighbor, your brother, the individual who lived right next door to you. You have to remember that non-believers were not allowed to live amongst Israel. They weren't allowed to live there. So your neighbor would have meant literally people who believed like you, people who conducted themselves like you. Your brother, your neighbor would have been these people, not everybody in the world. So these particular tenets would have been given by Yah because across the street or the guy next door to you wouldn't have been a Wiccan or a Christian or a Muslim. This would have been an individual who would have been keeping the tenets of Torah. So when they say your brother or your neighbor, that's exactly what he meant. So you shall not seek revenge against your brother. Remember Leviticus chapter 19 and 18. And it says, you shall not avenge nor bear a grudge against the children of your people. Literally speaking of an Israelite. You shall not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of your people. Once again, you can find this in the New Testament in Romans 12 and 19. Romans chapter 12 and 19 reinforces this commandment in the New Testament. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith Yahweh. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself. So this is another commandment being given in regard to Torah in the New Testament, that you are not to seek vengeance. And it's right there in Romans chapter 12. Don't seek vengeance against your kinsman. And it goes into a little more detail in regard to Romans. And we're getting ready to get into that, trust me. And this is going to be one of those things that's going to be a little trying for you all. Once again, I'm going to repeat what I said last week. That for me, when I first came into the knowledge of the truth and I started learning Torah, these commandments were tough because a lot of them didn't jive with what I had come up hearing in the church, as well as our society as a whole over here kind of pushed their narrative of morality and, you know what I'm saying, ethics and things of that nature. It was vastly different from what Yahweh was teaching. And I was like, yeah, it was really tough. And it will be a test to, I guess, to your cognitive cognitive dissonance this morning. And once again, we talk about vengeance, but let's get into this next commandment. If you're keeping count, this would be Commandment 8. Correct your brother when he is in error. I really, really, really appreciate this commandment because there is so much that goes on today where we are, just as a society, we are so... This society here is offended by everything. So if someone comes to correct them or, hey, man, listen, this was wrong or that was wrong, this or that, everybody's so offended by everything that this particular commandment would be hard to exact or execute on those outside of, I'm going to use, for the lack of a better term, the household of faith. You couldn't do it. And you were not supposed to try to put other people underneath the commandments anyway, who were not those who were supposed to be Israelites and follow the Hebrew Israelite cultures and traditions. Correct your brother when he is in error. Now, this is a good one. And you can find it in Leviticus chapter 19 and 17. Now, remember, you are in violation of a commandment if you see a brother who is in error and you allow him to keep going left. If if this brother is right there amongst you and you can communicate something to him, this is what you're to do. This is a commandment. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You will in any wise rebuke your neighbor and not suffer sin upon him. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You will in any wise rebuke your neighbor. Correct him. You're to correct your neighbor. You are to tell your neighbor when they're out of line. You are to go to your brother and say, hey, man, listen, you're wrong in this particular instance. You need to tighten up, man. You know what I'm saying? And this is an important thing, especially in this time and age, because we're everywhere. But once again, like I say, this generation, this millennial generation is just offended by everything. If you say something, literally a word, you could say a word that triggers them, they're offended. So in this particular generation, it would be hard to exact this commandment outside of, once again, the household of faith. People who are supposed to be conducting themselves like you, believing the same things as you, it would be an impossibility because it's an impossibility in their society for them to correct each other. This whole social media society is just biting, chewing, kicking, fussing at each other on a continual basis. And everybody has enough correction to go around because every morning I'm seeing something on social media where somebody is talking about what somebody else is doing wrong. So I find that funny, but let's get back into the commandment. Galatians chapter 6 is where you will actually find this commandment being communicated in the New Testament. Once again, the first 50 or 55 will be coming directly out of the New, and we're about to take a deep dive with this one and the next one. So in Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, you see this commandment being communicated to the Gentile converts. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, You which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you not also be tempted. So this restore such a one means to correct that individual. Go to that individual and correct him. 1 Timothy 5:20. Them that sin, rebuke before all, that others may fear. Correct your brother. No matter how you want to take it, this is a commandment that you should correct your brother. And then there's different levels to it, which we're getting ready to get into. There's different levels to correction. There's different levels to corrections, and I did a actual lesson on this, and I put it online some time back. I'm gonna see if it's still there. If it is, I'm gonna upload it again, so you guys can have it and you can read it in regard to correction. But let's jump into how we see correction being done, because a lot of brothers will be like, well, how do we do it? How is this applicable? How do we correct? It's kind of a subjective thing, but it's really not. You'll see Yeshua, who actually explains correction in the New Text, and we go to Matthew. Now, remember, there's two different type of corrections. There's a correction when a brother sins against you, and then there's correction when you remember or you know that a brother has aught against you. So let's go to Matthew chapter 18. Got my notes. Matthew chapter 18, 15 through 20. Matthew chapter 18, 15 through 20. If you look at that particular passage, the first thing you're going to notice is this is where Yeshua is talking about in regard to correcting an individual who has wronged you or has slighted you. Now, remember, there's a difference. There's going to be a situation where you feel slighted, where you feel as if an individual did you wrong. And then there's going to be situations where you feel as if, or you remember that an individual has approached you in this same fashion and say, hey man, I kind of feel a certain type of way, you know what I'm saying, that you woo. And it might not be resolved, but let's deal with this one first. And if you read it in its totality, 18, 15 through 20, you see the situation is set up where Yeshua is explaining to you how to correct your brother when he has violated. When it's a violation of this particular commandment, Yeshua actually explains to you how to go about it. First, you go to the individual by yourself first. Now, remember, the steps are very important in regard to this, because if you go grouped up initially, you know how we are. You go grouped up initially, you looking like, hey man, why are they all coming, to speak, stepping to me, or you kind of get in your body. And you miss the message because all you're seeing is all these people coming, to correct you. Now, he points out first to go by yourself. There's wisdom in it, because if you go by yourself initially and you talk to this person one-on-one, you might be able to make, disarm him, let him put his guards down, and he might hear reason. So this is why he said you go first by yourself. You go to him first because you're the one who was offended. Now, if this individual does not hear you, what does he say? You go back with another. You take another party, whether it be 1, 2, you know what I'm saying? You go back and then you re-explain the situation, because you've already went to the brother. And this is one thing that I preach a lot, that, listen, don't sit around talking about situations that you do not have, you have no intentions on correcting. That's just gossip. If you're just sitting around just talking about stuff that you have no intention on trying to correct, that's gossip. Now, if you're really genuinely concerned about the situation, issue, something you might have heard, something you might have seen, something might have occurred with you, and you're sitting and you're discussing it with other people, your intention is to move forward on the situation to change it. That's not gossip. That's you reasoning, sitting down, breaking different elements down. Whereas you just sitting there like, man, and that's a bunch of gossip. You're sitting around like a bunch of whores talking about some stuff that really doesn't even relate to you or affect you. But in this particular instance, you go back, you get another individual, you go back to this individual who you believe has wronged you in some type of way. And Yeshua explains to you then, if he still doesn't hear you, that you take him to the elders, or you take him to the church. You take him to the body, to the group of elders that or over your particular community. And you take that person there, and this is how you hold court. You go by yourself, you take a second person the next time, and then the third time you take them, and if this person still doesn't hear reason, Yeshua explains to you what to do then. Hey, get him out of here. He's out of here. He's not trying to do the right thing. Get rid of him, cut him off, don't deal with him. And this is what he explains in the particular instance where, and that's called excommunication. Something that needs to be done more in our communities. We need to excommunicate instead of trying to have this banter going back and forth with people, which it bears no fruit at the end of the day. It just creates content, creates the ability to sit around and just gossip like I say, like whores, talking about people and things of that nature. When you see something affecting your community as a whole that's unacceptable, what needs to be practiced is excommunication. We see that there was an instance where excommunication was exacted in in First and Second Corinthians, where Paul would have spoke about in First Corinthians chapter 5, I believe. Let's look it up real quick. First Corinthians chapter 5, we see where Yeshua talked about, look, get him up out of here. That's called excommunication. And I'm going to give you an example. I really actually wasn't going to give you this example, but I'm going to give you the example of where you see Rabbi Shaul or Paul and them actually exercising this form of excommunication where, put this person out from amongst us. And communities need to start to exact this more often than not. And this is what's funny. The suburbs, white communities, they exact this principle. They have what are known as, I can't remember the exact name, but I guess it's almost like a board that's in a neighborhood. And these people give you the rules when you move to their neighborhood or their community and say, hey, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you're in violation of these things, they pull up on you, they talk to you about it. If you don't correct it, they have the ability to excommunicate you, put you out of their community. You got to move, you got to go because you agreed to these terms and you don't stick to it. Whereas in black communities, we don't have that. We have this code of mind your business and everything is running willy-nilly. Yahweh tells you, correct your brother when he's in error, meaning be in your brother's business. You have to be in his business. If you see him doing something over there, you have to correct him. You have to correct him. If you don't, you're in direct violation. Now, I don't just run out on a daily basis and see people out here doing something and say, hey, man, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not, in terms of correction, that's not where I need to be, for the simple fact I don't live in the midst of a bunch of Israelites. I live in the midst of a bunch of unconscious Israelites, meaning I believe that all people who are my complexion here in this nation are Israelites, for the most part. Let me get that straight. For the most part, but I can't go around correcting them, holding them to this particular standard because they're not consciously aware, so they don't follow this standard. So I can't go out and try to thrust them, convert them into my way of seeing things until they've come to this point and are, once again, of the household of faith. Then I can correct them. If they never do, I can't hold them to that standard. I just walk right by them. But this needs to be exacted in our communities more, where we excommunicate people for their behavior and we put them out. Get out of here. You can't be around here. And this is what white people do in the suburbs. And this is one of the things that Paul, I'm getting ready to read you, in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, he's talking about an individual that they put out of the church. And I'm going to read it to you. It is reported commonly that there is fornication amongst you, and such fornication as is not so much as named amongst the Gentiles. See, once again, he wasn't trying to correct unconscious Gentiles. He was correcting Gentiles who had come to the knowledge of the truth and converted into the Hebraic culture. So he was like, man, this stuff don't even go on amongst the Gentiles. So they weren't correcting Gentiles, people who were not consciously aware of the Torah, the commandments, Yahweh, and said, I want to be a part of that. He's correcting people who are in the household of faith. And I hate using that term because it sounds too religious. But for the lack of a better term here, I just continue to use that, and forgive me. But those who are not inside of Israel and are not a part of the construct or not a part of Torah, this is what it is. So he says, and you are puffed up and have not rather mourned that he has done this deed might be taken away from amongst you. For I have verily, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have judged already as though I were present concerning that hath so done this deed. In the name of our Lord Yeshua HaMashiach, or Jesus Christ, when you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of our Lord Jesus Christ, to deliver such a one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord Jesus Christ. Your glorying is not good. You know that in little leaven, leaven the whole lump. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, whether with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote unto you the epistle not to keep company with fornicators. Now this is kind of emphasizing what I was saying. With fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous or extortioners, or with idolaters, for they must be in need to go out of this world. So if you're saying that I'm not going to deal with them at all, you would have to literally leave the planet, because they're just running amok. They're everywhere. So let's get back into 11. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man, this is emphasizing the point that I made, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or a covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, with such one not to eat. For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not ye judge them that are within. So understanding what Rabbi Shaul was saying here, he's telling them, hey, look, first, this guy over here, excommunicated, get him out of here. He's not supposed to be there. Y'all supposed to judge this a long time ago. You didn't. But we are to judge people who are in the household of faith, but not those who are outside of this, because they can't be held to the same standard as us. So we can't correct them in regard to their behavior. You can't do it. Leave them alone. Let them be twerkers and, this and that. Don't try to correct them. They're on their own thing. But individuals who call themselves brothers, yeah, you are to correct them. And this is what Rabbi Shaul was telling you right here. But I just gave you the format in regard to how you are to correct them. Now, excommunication needs to be practiced, because Yeshua just showed you. If once you go to correct your brother, if he doesn't get it, he's not seeing it, you go through the 3 steps. If they're not receptive to it, you're out of here. Period. Excommunication. Now, in the instance where a brother has aught against you, Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24. Remember, we're still in the commandment of correction. And I know a lot of you are like, man, it's kind of long. But this is what the one thing I'm trying to do is to show you that these commandments are not only in the new, but also to show you how they're applicable, why they're important to be applied today, and that if you are not applying them and you're a part of an Israelite community, that you're failing. You're not keeping Torah like you were supposed to. And this is one of the commandments, that you are correct. You are to correct your brother when you see him in error. And there's phases and steps to that. Once again, if you go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24, Yeshua would explain to you there where if there's a brother that you remember has ought or has an issue with you, what you are to do. Remember, this correction goes both ways. It's just not you running around pointing your finger at everything. Remember, there's going to be times when you find that you have violated or you have offended someone else. And if it comes back to your memory that you have not cleared this issue up, Yeshua tells you what to do. Because it's more important, Yeshua is telling you that if, number one, if you are not in good standing with your brethren, if you're running around and you're just running amok and you're not in good standing with your brethren, don't even come to the Father. Don't even come to Yahweh, because this is unacceptable. If you have not cleared up the issues that are in your backyard, if you have not sat down and tried to make peace with everyone that you have wronged, this is why I'm going to give you an example. When I came to the knowledge of the truth, and I've seen a lot of brothers do this when I was incarcerated, we get on the phone immediately. And because these are some of the first things we learn about forgiveness. And we get on the phone, man, and we're pierced in our hearts about the things that we had done in the past. So what I did, man, I started writing letters asking for forgiveness. I started getting on the phone with whoever I could communicate with and ask for forgiveness of my past transgressions. What I did was I looked for my transgressions. I didn't just sit around and say, oh, well, she did this. This led me to do this. Nope. What I did was identify what I did, and I went and I asked for forgiveness for it. I didn't try to say, but if you wouldn't have did this, I didn't do that. I looked at my end. I went to everybody and I made peace with them as much as humanly possible. And that's another commandment. We're going to get to that in a minute. But this is what I did. And I've seen so many brothers do it once they came to the knowledge of the truth. In regard to Torah, this is like one of the first things that we do is we grieve in regard to what we have done in the past, and we automatically get on the phone and we start making calls. I've seen brothers, man, who were sleeping with their cousins, girls, and all type of stuff, getting on the phone and coming to me saying, brother, should I do this? And I say, hey, man, that's the commandment. That's the commandment. You got to clean up. You got to clean up what's in your backyard. You know, you've never apologized to this brother for this. These are things that must be done. So once again, Yahweh speaks of, Yeshua speaks of and points out that correction goes both ways. If you are at the altar getting ready to give your sacrifice or your gift, I like to use Passover a lot. That if you're getting ready to sit down to the Passover observance, that you should, before you do this, you should take inventory. I like to use Yom Kippur as well. And that 9 days between Rosh Hashanah, or the blowing of the trumpets, coming to that conscious state, and then 9 days in between, that's a time for you to think back, reflect. Is there anything, anybody that you might have wronged or violated before you go and you place this gift of this fast on the altar? That before you do this, but in order to make it acceptable, you got to get yourself right in good standing. If you're out here just willy-nilly, you have violated a lot of people. And the one thing that I always tell my wife and other people, one of my greatest fears is hypocrisy, being looked at as a hypocrite, and people saying, well, dag, man, the brother talking about this, but he over here doing this. So I always do self-evaluations. This is another reason I've stayed away from videos for so long, that I was going through a lot when I came home. And I've told this story before, that the process of being reacclimated back to this society versus that society is a long, arduous road. It's a journey. So I had to reconcile a lot of things, but not to lose sight, in order to get on this thing and be able to speak to you guys with a clear conscience, not saying, man, should I be on here because I was doing this last week? No, understanding that I search me before I make these decisions to do these things, because I never want to look hypocritical. And once again, Yeshua is telling you that, look, there's two ways. This is a two-way street. If you find that you're in violation, before you even make that offering, go to your brother and try to reconcile. Paul would have said, be at peace as much as humanly possible with all men. So there's only so much that you can do to make a person accept what it is that you're offering. So a lot of people ask me, Well, brother, what if he doesn't accept? You've done your part. You've gone to the brother and said, hey, listen, what is it that I have done so we can clear up this matter? And even if you do know what you've done, go to that person and say, hey, man, I was dead wrong for this. Let's get this thing straight. And this is what Yeshua is talking about. So correct your brother and also correct yourself. Don't be in that, that little pool, allowing things to fester and to continue to creep in. These things need to be done on an instantaneous basis. Rabbi Shaul would have said in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 through 27, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 to 27, don't allow the sun to set on your wrath. That's important because you don't want things to fester. You don't want people to have the opportunity to use old things and bring them into new situations. Because if you haven't cleared up something old, it's easy for somebody to still hold that ought against you and to bring it into a new situation. Whereas if you've cleared up everything and you violate somewhere else down the line, a person looks at you and say, okay, and that's just human nature. Whether people would like it or not, they say, well, he's in pretty good standing with me. But at the same time, people look for the opportunity. If you haven't come to them and try to reconcile a situation, they look for the opportunity to jump out there and bash you in your head at any opportunity. It could be the smallest thing because they're holding on to this thing that you never cleared up. But once you clear things up, it makes people just so approachable and it's easier to deal with, and they look at you through a whole nother prism. So that's the commandment of correcting your brother when he's in error. So let's get to this next commandment, which is also a good one. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Very good commandment, very powerful commandment. Once again, listen to what I am saying. It says, do not hate your brother in your heart. Now, a lot of people are getting ready to have a problem with what I'm getting ready to say, but I don't really mind because, like I say, once again, when I first started reading and studying these commandments, it was a bitter pill, a hard pill for me to swallow, being raised up in the church, and looking at society the way that I seen it, being programmed via the TV, social media, all that type of stuff, being programmed to a certain degree, a certain way, made me view things through a certain prism. So when I started hearing these commandments and looking at them from what they were, I was like, okay, I see how that could be good for us in today's times. So it says, do not hate your brother in your heart. So we're going to go to Leviticus chapter 19 and 17. Leviticus chapter 19 and 17. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. Don't hold that thing in your heart. Don't hold that thing in your heart. Now, once again, we're dealing with the brother. It's not saying anyone else, that you can't hate anyone else. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, and you're going to be like, man, hold up. So the brother is telling me that I can hate other people. Okay, let's look at some examples of great people before we get into this. Great people. Now, before we get into this, as a matter of fact, let me read where you can find this in the New Testament. 1 John 4 and 20. If a man say, I loveth Yahweh and hateth his brother, he is a liar. So once again, that's in the household of faith. That is in the household of faith. That is not the guy across the street who's a Wicca. And a lot of people will say, well, no, you hate the sin. You don't hate the person. No, that's not what it says. And that you just can't even impose that. And a lot of people impose that, say, no, you don't hate the person, you hate the actions. No. After a while, the person who continues to function in this way, Yahweh talks about giving that person over to a reprobate mind. That person becomes that. Literally. That person becomes, you can't disconnect or disassociate that person from that behavior, that conduct that person is exhibiting and living through and doing. That is who they are. I'm gonna give you an example, and it's no need to try to tiptoe around it. When I say the name RuPaul, what do you think? What do you connect RuPaul with? What is RuPaul to you overall? You're not going to be able to disassociate RuPaul from what RuPaul has done for years, ever since I first heard of RuPaul when I was a kid. And now this person is still doing this same thing. How can you separate and say, well, I hate that RuPaul does it? This is what this person becomes. You become the action. You become what it is that you practice after a while. This is what it is. You can't disassociate the two. And for people to sit and say, oh, well, see, no. When he says hate, he means hate the action. Okay, well, let's read what David said about it in Psalms, about hate, before we just throw that emotion out the window and say, well, no, it's a sin to hate. No, actually it's not. Let's go to Psalms. And trust me, I'm going to get to read where you're going to say, well, Jesus said don't hate your enemies. We'll get to that in a second. So Psalms and 139 is where we're going to be at, because I want you to be able to read this, because I've heard a lot of different takes on this. And the one that I found the folks fascinating is what I heard from a guy from the Nation of Islam, when we were sitting and we were talking about hatred. The NOI, the Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, all that. For a group of people who preach so much hate and to turn around and say hatred is wrong, I don't get it. But anyway, it's a complete and total oxymoron. But let's read about David and hate. David says in Psalms 139, verse 1 through 24, he says, do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate you? And am I not grieved with those that rise up against you? I hate them. I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemy. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me into the way of everlasting. So let's just deal with that real quick. First thing David says here is he talks about how he hates individuals who don't practice the Hebrew culture, because if you don't practice the Hebrew culture, you do not acknowledge Yahweh. Let's get that understood. Those who practice the Hebrew culture, those who adhere to the 613 laws, are those who love Yahweh, just period. Let's just get that understood first. So first thing he talks about, he hates them. I hate them. I don't like them. I count them my enemy. He said, I hate them with a perfect hatred. Now, this is what's funny about the Nation of Islam guy. We talked about this, and I said, well, David said that he hated people with a perfect hatred. Not just hated them, a perfect hatred. My hatred is perfect. So the Nation of Islam said, well, David was wrong there. And I said, wow. Because he goes on now, this is them saying that, because he goes on to say, after that, it was a reason I read that. He says, search me to see if there's any wickedness in me. But he just made this proclamation to Yahweh that I hate them people over there with a perfect hatred. They're my enemies because they do not follow you. They do not adhere to what you adhere to. They don't, what you set down, they don't like it. We don't do that. I hate those people. They're counted as my enemies. I despise them. I don't kick it with them. I don't like them people. So he turns right around and says, now search me. If I've said anything wrong, correct me. There was no correction. Now, how do I know there was no correction? If we read 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 5, this is Yahweh making a proclamation about David, that through his whole life, David only did one thing wrong in his eyes that was wrong. This is Yahweh's eyes, not man's eyes. So I'm not here, and you shouldn't as well be here to try to impress man. Your thing is to try to get in tune and be in good standing with Yah. That's the purpose. So understanding that in this particular instance, Yah said that David only did one thing that was, led to all this stuff that snatched the kingdom away from all that. That was the whole situation with Uriah the Hittite. Now, understanding that he also got Israel punished for his senses, David taking the census, well, he knew he was dead wrong for doing it. He shouldn't have did it in the beginning. So if we look scripturally, there's only two instances where we see that Yahweh was very displeased with David. But Yahweh brought one thing up in particular and said, hey, there's only one thing that has displeased me with David. And this led to this. So understanding that he didn't say, oh, okay, also David was hating people. No, David was the apple of Yahweh's eye. He told Yahweh, man, look, anything you want, I would have given you, David, plus. So he was the apple. He never, there's nothing that David did or said. He wrote these in the Psalms. But see, once again, these are the things that you guys will cherry pick and choose what you want to add to your doctrine. So once again, let's get back to it. David said that he hates people with a perfect hatred. Those are outside of Israel, not his brethren. He said he hates those people who don't. Now, those individuals who do would be counted as his brethren. So he can't say he hates them via the commandment. We're not dealing with a person's actions. Once again, we're not dealing with the actions of the person. And once again, I've heard that from time and time memorial. Oh, it's the action that you hate, not the person. No, once again, I'm not going to harp on that. This is what David said. So let's move into it, because he said, once again, check my heart. Am I wrong? Am I wrong in English? Check my heart. He was never corrected about that. So a lot of you this is the first thing you're going to gravitate to, is I already know. The first thing a lot of you are going to jump on is Matthew chapter 5. You're going to jump on Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 and 44. So it's a lesson to be had here that will open up a little bit of more of a door for you and educate you a little bit more in regard to Torah versus something else. So if we go to Matthew's chapter 5, and I'm going to say this. So a lot of you like to jump around to what makes you feel good and what's convenient. Understanding what I'm saying here is that it's a permissible act to hate. It's an emotion. Hate is nothing more than an emotion. And the problem is that we get caught up in this vacuum in regard to this Christian doctrine where we are taught that you're not to hate. David just showed you, first and foremost, that you can hate as long as you're hating the correct things. Number one, Yah said, don't hate your brother in your heart. Now, let's deal with what Yeshua would have said. Now, because a lot of you are going to jump straight to, like I said, Matthew 5, 43 through 44. And it says, you have heard. Now, remember that word. Now, remember that phrase. You have heard, because we're going to come back to that in just a second. You have heard that it hath been said. You have heard that it has been said. Remember that. You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publican the same? Okay, so let's just deal with that, because because a little bit chilly down here, and we got these sinus allergy things going on. But so first, let's deal with Yeshua's words, because either he's schizophrenic and he turns right around and he says something else in regard to hate, or it's true what these people say about just hate the action, don't hate the person, hate the action, or I'm just wrong. So let's go to Luke chapter 14 real quick. And we're going to get back to that, but let's go to Luke chapter 14 and 26 real quick. 14 and 26. And there went a great multitude. I'm going to start at 25. And there went great multitudes with him, and turned and said unto them. And he turned and said unto them, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. So what's going to happen is you're going to try to disconnect those two. But he turns right around and tells him, hey, look, if you don't hate your whole family and hate yourself, and I'll explain it, then you can't follow me. Let's deal with the hating of oneself first, right? So then I'm going to get into what Yeshua was talking about when he was talking about love your neighbor. Love your enemy, and so on and so forth. Because there's a difference in love in this particular instance. So what he's saying is that, first and foremost, if you don't hate yourself, meaning the individuals that you used to be, if you don't hate how you used to be, how you used to carry on before you came to this point of enlightenment, until you came to this point, if you don't hate yourself, if you don't look at yourself and say, man, I was really messed up. I hate and despise myself in this particular instance. Also, your mother, your brother, your father, understanding that what he's talking about is he came to divide households. He didn't come to establish, hey, look, the family nucleus and the nuclear family, but you got this person over here is practicing Islam, this person doing this, doing. What he's saying, remember, he's telling these people, I have come to create division to the point where you're going to hate each other, to the point where understanding that some are going to listen to this, some are going to listen to this, some are going to be on this, some are going to be on that. It's going to cause a friction. And you have to, if you're a follower of me, you're going to look at your loved ones and you're going to say, man, I hate them people, man. They tripping over there. I don't fool with them. I'm going straight after him. This is who I'm going to pursue. This is this is the life I'm going to be a part of. I can't, I don't like that. But understand, he goes on to explain to you that who are my brothers. Yeshua himself explains, well, who is my mother? Who is my brothers? Those individuals who are in the household of faith, and I hate keep using that term. But this is what he meant when he talked about that love relationship with your enemy. So let's go back to that for a second and understand that he wasn't schizophrenic by any stretch of the imagination. Understand what he was saying in that particular instance and why he said that. Understand that he meant what he said when he said, if you don't hate your mother, your brother, because that's a commandment that you have to love your enemies. You have to love your brother. You can't hate him in your heart. But individuals who are outside of the household of faith, like David said, I hate them. Now, without further ado, let's break down what Yeshua is talking about in Matthew 5 and 43. Once again, I apologize. These sinuses, allergies, everything is just busting me up this morning. Okay, now, the most important part of this is going to be when you read him, especially if you have a study Bible, this is the most important part. A lot of people say that Yeshua came to change things. He actually didn't. What he was doing, and a lot of people, he was attacking the law. See, he's like, you no longer have to do that. No, what he was doing was he was attacking the traditions of men, or he was attacking the Talmudic traditions, which are known as the traditions of the elders or the traditions of the fathers. I'm going to show you in just a second I'm about to show you now how you can identify what he's speaking about when he says it. First place we're going to look at is where we just left. Look at 43. And I told you to remember this. When he's attacking a tradition, not the Mosaic commandment, he never attacks the Mosaic commandments. When he's attacking a tradition, this is what he's going to say. This is what you need to look for. when he's attacking a man-made tradition, and I'm going to show you, you have heard that it has been said. Whenever you read, you have heard that it has been said. He is talking about a tradition of man. Go to Matthew's 15 real quick. So, Matthew chapter 15, and we're going to start at 1. Then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? The traditions, they didn't say the Mosaic commandments or the commandments. They said the traditions of the elders. This is Talmudic traditions. Understand there's a thing called fencing of the Torah. A lot of you are not familiar with this. This is why Christianity is able to slide stuff under you. I mean, this is why the Hebrew communities are able to slide things underneath you, because they're able to take these and say, well, see, this isn't. No, it's called a fencing of the Torah. So what the Talmud is it's actually a fence around the Torah. So what our forefathers did, the scribes, the elders, all of them, they created man-made traditions to put around the Torah so you wouldn't violate the actual Torah. But here's the problem. After years of following these man-made traditions, they became more important than the actual Torah itself. This is why when those Pharisees and scribes would have went to Yeshua, they didn't say, why are they violating these commandments? They're violating the commandments. No, they said they're violating the traditions of the elders. That's that fence. It's called the Talmud. Those are traditions and commandments that would have been created. Those would have been mandates, not commandments. Those would have been traditions and mandates created because of situations that were arising that they placed around the Torah, so you would not actually be able to violate the commandment because you were stopped by this fence. Before you even violated the commandment, this fence stopped you. But it had become so bad and so perverse that the people were actually looking towards the traditions of the elders versus the commandments. And this is where Yeshua's duty was, to combat these traditions, not the commandments. And I'm going to show you in just a second. So once again, he said, why do your disciples transgress the traditions of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. Understand, that's not a commandment. You can't find anywhere in Torah where you're commanded to wash your hands before you eat. And you got to remember, there's a lot of rituals that we created, especially at mealtime, where you're washing your hands at different segments of the meal. You're washing your hands. It's a lot of traditions. And this is one of the things they pointed out. Once again, they did not say the commandment. They said the tradition of the elders. And Yeshua's response to this would have been, but he answered and said unto them, why do you also transgress the commandments of Yah or God by your traditions? So understanding they had created these traditions that was ultimately having people to transgress Torah, because they were following these traditions, which some of them were inherently wrong, that were causing this violation. Now, understand, in this particular instance, they didn't ask Yeshua himself, why are y'all violating? Because Yeshua would have actually been keeping that tradition of washing his hands, because there's nothing inherently wrong with washing your hands before you eat. They had made it a rule, saying if you don't wash your hands, you're in error. No, that's not a commandment. Only thing that causes me to violate or be in bad standings with Yahweh is if I violate the Torah, not this man-made tradition. This man-made tradition is just to keep me on track, so I don't actually violate the Torah. But it had become so large, the Talmud had become so large that people were looking towards the Talmud instead of the Torah. So let's get back to this. because understanding that once you understand when he says, has it not been said? Remember what it says right here. You have heard that it has been said. Now let's go to, and I'm going to show you, whenever Yeshua is speaking directly about the Torah, he says, or the commandments of Yah, directly, he says this. This is going to come out of Matthew 4, chapter 4, and we're going to go to verse 4, verse 7, and verse 10. Remember this. Because this is important, because you have to know how when you're reading this, why he's saying written versus said. Said is meaning that they created it versus it was written because Yahweh had written this. So you all understand what this narrative is. This is the narrative in which Yeshua is being tempted by Satan. So verse 4 says, but he answered, and he's already being tempted. This is Yeshua. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. It was written. That was something that came out of Torah. It was written. We go down to verse 7. Jesus said unto him, it is written again. This is him citing the commandments of Yah. He wasn't going in citing the traditions of the elders. He was going in citing Torah. Once again, you go down to 10. And saith Jesus unto him, or Yeshua unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written. Whenever he is talking about, and you can go through here and look up all the one places where he said, it is written, it is written, it is written, versus it is said. So let's go back to when he was talking to the people about hatred. So I can give you a clearer understanding in regard to loving your enemies. He said, it once again, you have heard that it has been said, love your enemies, love your neighbor, and hate your enemies. Where in the commandment did it say that? I just read you the commandment where it's specified. Where it's specified. Now, please follow the stream of logic, because I'm not going to leave this stream. It's going straight. It's not doing this and going in circles. It's going straight. Once again, David was not in error when he was saying, because he was not going off of something that was taught to him. It wasn't a commandment that he had to hate them. Understand, when he said, I know you heard this before, because this was an add-on. This was a Talmudic commandment, or a Talmudic thing, where they were told, once again, you don't see it saying anywhere in Torah, love your brother, but hate your enemy. It doesn't say that. Nowhere in Torah is there a commandment that specifies that you have to hate your enemy. This is another created tradition by the elders that is in the Talmuds. Once again, all of them aren't bad, but there are some that cause you to violate the Torah. And I should have actually jumped into, well, actually, there's a place where Yahweh tells you how to deal with your enemies when you've come into a state of warfare, that you give your enemy the opportunity to give up. If they don't give up, you utterly destroy them. So that's a commandment. Understand? So there's no hatred being perpetrated. Yahweh is not telling you to hate your enemies. But David is telling Yahweh, I hate people who do not serve you. He is not commanded to do this. Understand, there is a difference between being commanded to do something and to follow Torah and look at everybody else and say, everybody who does not love Yahweh, I have disdain for him. And this is what Yeshua would have taught when he was talking about hate your mother, your brother, all of them, because you have to have this thing. You have to dislike individuals who don't. Now, I'm saying this is not a commandment, but Yeshua himself is telling you, if you don't hate your mother, your brother, because you're looking at them and saying, yo, y'all tripping, man. This is not it. I don't look. I can't look. Nope. Can't get down with you. I'm going over here. Once again, he's not talking about people's actions. He's talking about the individuals. So understand, in this particular instance, he's talking about the traditions of the elder, because the elders had added to the Talmud that you not only you love your neighbors, but you're commanded to hate your enemies. But Yeshua goes on to explain and say, no, 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 no. Don't hate your enemies. Pray for them. Do this, do that. Do everything correct. Now, let's explain this love. He's talking about an agape sense where you treat everybody the same. Now, there are commandments where Yahweh clearly tells you there's a preferential treatment to the Hebrew community first. And then when you deal with the Gentiles, you deal with them differently. I'm going to give you one. In the particular instance where Yahweh would have told you about repaying debts, that you are not to exact any type of interest from your brother. But you can charge interest to a Gentile. This is the difference. There's always going to be a difference between Gentile and Hebrews when it comes to Torah. So when Yeshua is explaining to these people, he's saying, no, 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 no. There's no commandment that you have to hate people, that you have to hate people outside of them. I'm telling you to use agape love even when you're dealing with them. Pray that they'll, you know what I'm saying, be a good example for them. Pray for them. This. Be a good example for these people. At some point, maybe they'll come to a point of repentance. But be a good example for them. Pray for them. You know, do good by them. Be an example of kindness to them. He's telling them, he's absolving this commandment, this man-made tradition that they have been placed under, that you have to hate your enemies. They don't have to hate their enemies. Once again, let's understand there's a difference between the commandments of Yah, and there is a difference between the man-made traditions that they just told them. Why are they violating the traditions of the elders? This would have been one, that you have to hate your enemies, and Yeshua saying, no, that's not a commandment from Yah. I'm telling you, love them. Show them the same agape love. Show them that same agape love where it's unconditional. You don't care how they act and behave, that you will pray for them, that you'll treat them kindly. You know what I'm saying? Once again, there's a difference between the commandments that Yahweh gives in regard to how you should treat Gentiles on a daily basis. But Yeshua, let's read it, and we'll see how Yeshua said treat them. He said, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Those are your enemies. Those are the individuals he called their enemies. It doesn't mean that you have to hate them. That was David's choice. He said, man, I hate them. David was not condemned for that. And I'm not sitting here telling you that you have to do that. But in this particular instance, he's only demonizing it because this was a commandment that was created that put them underneath that. Because he turned right around and told them, if you don't hate your mom, dad, and all of them, understanding that he's abolishing, this is what Yeshua was doing. He's abolishing this Talmudic tradition that they were placed under and replacing it and saying, no, you don't have to do that. You got to do the first part. You got to love your brother. You got to love, you know what I'm saying? But you don't hate your enemy. That's not how that works. Now, if you have a disdain for him, you hate him, fine. But you're not commanded to hate him. Am I being clear here? There's a difference. There's a clear, concise difference. Once again, I'm going to say this again and I'll close out because I wanted to actually turn this into a lesson for the Shabbat. And I think I did a pretty good job at that because this is the third commandment that we're dealing with. And once again, let me reiterate to you. There's a difference here. There's a Talmudic commandment or tradition of the elders, and there is the Mosaic commandment. How did I say that you know which one is which? By what Yeshua says before he attacks it. If he says it is written, he's talking about that. If he's talking about you heard it was said, he's talking about the tradition. That is not a written thing. That is a tradition that people follow because they were created. And Yeshua is, no. You don't have to do this. You don't have to hate people in your heart because that tradition was handed down that it is commanded of you to hate your enemies. That is not the case. And Yeshua is telling them, you have to, yeah, you can. You can. You don't have to hate people. You can love everybody. Do, you know what I'm saying? Do right by everybody. Show them agape love. But David was never condemned for his emotional response to everybody outside of Israel because there's no condemnation there. David was a righteous man, an upstanding man. But once again, it was about this tradition that was levied upon the people, and they were forced to hate everybody that was outside of Israel. They were forced, they were commanded to do this. And this is not what the case is. So in this particular instance, he's not telling you that you had, hey, look, you had none. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, just don't do this. Just don't do this. Just don't do it. You ain't got to sit down and eat with them and do all that type of stuff. You don't have to do that. But at the same time, people that persecute you, do wrong by you, still pray for them, man. You know what I'm saying? Still be a good example for them. Still do good things by them. If their sheep falls into a ditch, help them out, and you'll see that as a commandment. Help them out. Help them get it out. Be a good example to these people, and maybe you will draw them into the household of faith. But look, I've gone along. I appreciate the time. I enjoyed this today, and I look forward to this week. Once again, I'm doing the traditions versus the holy days of Yah. Remember, that's where we're headed this week. We're going to do next week. We're going to have all of the holy days. And then we're going to have the man-made traditions, the ones that were created by the brothers in all throughout Torah that are not a part of Leviticus chapter 23. But don't worry about it. We're still going to have our top 3 or 5 Wednesday and next Shabbat. But I wanted to do this today and go along with it because I wanted you all to have something to sit, watch, listen to. Once again, I like to do these things. Not to hear myself speak so much, but to give you something to be able to sit and listen to. Give you something to sit, take notes, go back and look at and learn from. Remember, we're dealing with the rudimentary basics here. We're not getting too deep. We're just hitting it from the surface. But once again, I digress. Enjoyed the time today. Love you all, man. If you haven't already, go to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up, hit the bell for notification, because once again, we're going to come out with this content every Sabbath, and the top 3 or 5 will be on Wednesday and the Sabbath. So once again, love you all. Thank you for your time. Yahweh bless you on this holy day of the Sabbath, and can't wait to put something else out for you all. Have a good one.